one kind of interface and another that they utilize together in order to create a unique game experience, if that makes sense. And if you wanted to say, like, if it's got over 50% menu, it's a menu game. I have a meme that I wanted to show you because ever since I've seen this meme, I haven't really been able to stop thinking about it. It's a Calvin and Hobbes. It's the classic "let me show you something, kid" meme. But this got me thinking about game design. And for people who can't see it, it's basically if Dad walks in and says, "Playing a record, I'll show you something interesting. The two types of games are menus and parkour. All games fall into these two categories. Counter-Strike, menus. Apex, parkour. Baldur's Gate, menus. Minecraft, parkour. Despite jumping around a lot, Destiny 2 is menus." and then it's like Calvin just like absolutely never going to be able to fall asleep again after seeing this. Now, the reason why I wanted to ask you about that is partially to kind of like think about games that we've played recently and figure out if they would technically be considered menu or parkour. But mostly, but also I think I actually might know a little bit more about like what they're actually talking about here, rather than the way that it's being presented. But
I think the way they probably mean it is the way you're interfacing with the game.
Yes, that was my
More so,
taking. Yes.
In like games like Destiny, it is a menu because you have to go into your weapon thing and all your loadout stuff is done on menus and sheets like that.
Yes, that's your interface.
Kind of play the game. Minecraft is mainly done in the world exploring and mining, so that would be parkour.
Parkour, right. Exactly. Yeah, that
EVE Online
is
menus because the entire game is just a drop-down menu.
Exactly. And then somebody, I think, in comments was like, "What about Stanley Parable?" And it's like, well, in some ways, I can see the case that you would make that that's parkour because you're moving through the game world in order to get from point A to point B. Somebody else said, well, you could also consider it menus because basically it's just a series of choices that you're making, like an expanded, but you're just doing the menus by walking in certain directions. I guess that for me, like a walking sim would almost always fall into sort of like the parkour part because the whole mechanics of it are going through the game world and there's really nothing more to it. I feel like most RPGs are going to fall into the menu category here.
Many of your item-driven games as well would be menu. So your Resident Evil, for instance, is not parkour.
No, your Resident Evil really isn't parkour. I started to think, though, like, because I mentioned Dark Souls. What would Dark Souls be considered?
Menu.
I guess so. I guess it would be menu, but then you have, like, a lot of the action parts of how you're playing the game that are not really reliant.
You can't jump.
But a little bit larger than the idea of parkour. I think that the general framework is you have games where you have like a manual interface that you go into, like an actual screens that determine your character leveling and composition and your makeup, and then you have ones where it's about the in-world experience, like that you're going through, and they're framing it as parkour. I really more or less think about it as like the action part or the strategy part almost. Like that this is something that we do as management, and this is something that we do as active like action in the game. So like Mirror's Edge is all about parkour anyway, so that's obviously a parkour game.
I mean, it could be menus, but it is actually parkour. I don't think there's any menus that you go into in that game.
The first one especially. The second one there might, but I don't think just because there is a menu that necessarily makes it a menu game. Like there are some upgrades and continuous in like a
I think the biggest difference would be that a menu game requires you are in a menu to make a choice about the game.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's a good option.
So, like, Baldur's Gate, you're doing all your choices on your character screen and your inventory and stuff like that.
Right. So
menu.
That's menu.
Minecraft, you're doing everything you do more so in the world. Yes, there are some menus for your crafting and stuff, but all the choices you make are just gonna put that there and use it.
Right. Exactly.
It's a little different. I don't know.
I think we're drilling down to what this actually is about, which is about...
Yeah, we're mining down.
We're mining down to how the player actually interfaces with the game, and the methodology that we're using in order for them to experience the game. And in some cases, it's being done through an actual physical interface where you have to make decisions on screens. In some places, it's being done in-game world through the act of the exploration itself. Like, those are probably a little closer to, like, what you're actually talking about, and it's being framed here as menus or parkour. But I kind of feel like, to be fair, instead of, like, the straight-up, this is a menu game, this is a parkour game, I feel like games are kind of, like, on a sliding scale between these two, where they're, like, I almost feel like if it were to take Dark Souls for a minute, I'd say maybe, like, 40% parkour and about 60% menus, because there are a lot of things that are in-game where you're supposed to be making choices by rolling around and parrying and fighting and attacking that have nothing to do with the menus and don't really progress the game at all. And then there are a lot of other parts that are menu-based that you require so that you can level up using your souls. They mentioned Apex. Like, yeah, Apex is going to be basically all parkour. There are some menu interfaces for choosing matches and stuff, but it's basically all parkour. So it's like 95% parkour. I feel like these are just two interfaces that are used to different degrees, and you don't really get pure versions of this unless you're playing, like, I don't know, Zork, and it's like just the whole game is literally a menu. Like, I don't really know about that. I feel like there's just certain amounts of one kind of interface and another that they utilize together in order to create a unique game experience, if that makes sense. And if you wanted to say, like, if it's got over 50% menu, it's a menu game. If it's over 50%, it's a parkour game. That whole thing about, like, despite jumping around a lot, Destiny 2 is menus. Like, I get that because it's all character upgrades and stuff. But I'd still say that there's, like, 40% of that game is still parkour, where it's just running around, shooting things, jumping off of things, getting on your bike, like, rolling around. There's still a lot of parkour in that, even though you might be able to consider it a menu game. So, yeah. I don't know. But I was kind of curious about your thoughts on this, because once I saw this, it was a couple days ago, I was like, this makes an interesting point about game design and user interface, but at the same time, boy, it seems overly simplistic to what the...
Definitely oversimplified. I think it comes down to the major mechanisms for choosing what you do.
Right.
Is it action-based, or is it based on a menu of some sort? Is it a dialogue tree? Is it your character sheet? Is it the items you equip in your inventory?
Right.
Again, Minecraft as an example, you can do anything with anything, really. You could use a stick and get by pretty well.
Sure.
So it's all about actions, whereas a game like Baldur's Gate is all about menus.
Right.
All your dialogue options, all your spells, your sheets, your character
right down
sheets,
to combat.
Upgrades.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's all based on that, yeah. And, like, I mentioned KOTOR, I was talking about KOTOR in the first one, that is obviously a menu game. Like, that's the game is controlled specifically by you. You can pause the action entirely, and you can run the game through menus to make all of your decisions for how you interact with the game. If I want to make a flurry of blows, basically, in the game, I don't do it by pushing a button that makes the flurry of blows. I do it by choosing flurry of blows as one of my actions. It's...
Right.
It is a different kind of interface, because it's a different kind of game. But then you get those kinds of games like Borderlands. And it's like, a lot of Borderlands is jumping around and shooting things, and you kind of feel like that's parkour. But the fact of the matter is that without the myriad number of menus that have to go into that for character progression, for the stats that are all on the guns, which is a whole other thing, that very much is also like a menu game, but has very specific parkour stuff in it that, augments that. RPGs, like I was saying, kind of usually lend itself to menus. Walking sims kind of lend themselves to the parkour aspect. There are games like, platformers are a good example. Platformers are usually very parkour based just in general. But that being said, there are usually some kind of menus and interfaces that you go through that might be part of the character progression. And then we haven't even gotten on to the mini games, because sometimes mini games completely throw that off as well. In terms of what you're playing.
Gwent is a menu.
Gwent is definitely a menu. And a complete menu, much more so than Witcher 3, even though Witcher 3 would probably be considered a menu game. But there's definitely a lot of action elements to it in the combat, because it's real-time combat. So there is that. So I kind of came away from the conclusion that it's an interesting meme, it's a fun meme, that talks a little bit more about game design. Probably, maybe could have come up with different ways of presenting that information to explain it, but I get it's fun to just say menus and parkour, because it does draw the attention to it.
Yeah, probably.
I guess if we wanted to say this much, you can have games that are a certain percentage parkour and a certain percentage menus, if we're using that terminology. That does kind of encompass the whole idea of games, because at the end of the day, video games are a series of choices that you make, and it's just a matter of what input you're using to make those choices and how it's presented to you.
Pretty much. It's not always going to be 100% one thing or the other, so a mix.
Right.
For sure.
It's going to be a little bit of a mix. I'm kind of curious to see how everybody else feels about it. Is there a better way to present this information? I don't know. But what kind of interface do you appreciate? All of that good stuff. If you have thoughts on it, let us know in the comments down below, because I think we've kind of said our piece on it. But let
us know down in the menu below.
In the menu down below, where you get to make choices, because there's not parkour in the comments section. We know that much.
No jumping around down there. It's a mosh pit.
Just jump around in the comments. It's cool.